Alright, so today we're going to do a demonstration on air shocks, both on my 1956 chop top oval that you see over here, as well as on the Fastback. It started out with a small disaster that happened on the Fastback last week where one of the air shocks actually popped. Turned out it wasn't my fault, but you'll have to watch the rest of the video to see. At the same time, I've been asked a lot of questions as to the air shocks that are on this and how I got them to work. It was only a temporary situation that I put them on there to get it to a show last October. To be able to get the tow bar underneath it, you need it up kind of high. And when I got it to the show, I wanted to dump it back down low, and the fastest way to make an adjustment is just to put air in it. So I threw a set of air shocks on there to get it to the show. So we're going to demonstrate how that works on there and how they differ from what you see on the Type 3, as well as the repair job that you got over here. So if you're interested in air shocks on a Volkswagen, this is a video for you. Please go ahead and give me a thumbs up if you like me, thumbs down if you don't. Go ahead and subscribe if you do enjoy my videos. I do appreciate every one of you, and if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and post them. Well, I've been asked a couple times by a few different people here on YouTube, just what kind of air suspension do I have on the front of the Fastback. I figured now's as good a time as any because I had a little disaster and one of the air shocks actually blew up. I was rounding the corner and I heard a little bit of hissing. As I drove a little further, I heard the tires rub, so I thought maybe just the air was a little bit low or something. So I drove it home, I put air in it, and it held air just fine. I drove down the street, went around the corner again, and it was a loud bang. And at that point it lost all air. The problem seems to be, quite obviously, that the air shock exploded. You can see all the oil dripping out of the bottom of it. So I'm going to have to replace that. Now this is the Type 3 suspension. The beams on these are very different than that of a bus or a Beetle. They do have two torsion bars that run through the bottom here, and they crisscross in such a way that each side is the full length of the beam. Each trailing arm here is attached to one of those torsion bars, and just like your rear suspension, you can take the trailing arm off by loosening the grub screw here, pull it off, turn it, and put it back on, because it has a whole bunch of splines on it. Now what I did real simply, and I love that I did this without taking off the spindles. I did this by just removing the grub screw from there and the one from the top, and pulling out both of these trailing arms at the same time, lifting this up with one hand, and you've got to have arms like Popeye to do that, and then re-indexing this two more on the bottom. I moved it over two splines and then pushed it back into position. That got me as low as I wanted to go comfortably. You notice there's no bump stops in here, and that's because this arm actually just touches them when it bottoms out. If the bump stops are in the way, it wouldn't go down as low as I'd want it to. And the air shock is actually being used for what it was designed for. It's actually being used to stiffen up the front end, which makes it less likely to hit the bump stops. Now the shock will raise it, of course, some. Not a whole lot, a couple inches maybe, but that's not the purpose of it, and it's not the reason why I installed this. It is nice to have, of course, just for that reason that you can stiffen everything up. But real simply, and this is real simple, it's a nut on the bottom that holds it there on the shock mounting point on the trailing arm, and then up on the top at the shock tower, there's a bolt. And if you remove those two, that shock comes out. So we're going to pull that shock out, we're going to have a better look at it. And the beautiful thing is I've actually been prepared, because I figured they were going to wear out. I've got a box with a set of brand new shocks in it. So once I replace that bad one, I'll still have one spare, which I'll probably put on the other side someday when that one decides to go. Now why that one bursted, I don't know. I did have one that burst right out of the package first time I put air into it. I mean, I hadn't even gotten 20-30 pounds into it, and the seal on the bottom broke, and that looks like what happened here. Some people tell me the diaphragms explode, but I have not seen a diaphragm explode on one of these yet. Well, anyway, we're going to show what it takes to install one of these shocks on there, and without mentioning any brand names, we'll demonstrate how this gets installed and how I've got it set up. My little girl was with me today when we were going for a ride, right, Skeeter? Yes, you were. You were about to have some fun with your daddy. We were going to go get you some french fries, but that kind of pooped out, didn't it? Yeah, we're going to have to go take the Nissan for a ride instead. Here's the Z. Yes, I still have it. Right, Skeeter? Good girl. Well, it turns out after I was looking under here a little more closely that the sway bar mount, which is just a piece of L bracket over here, which actually attaches to the shock mounting point on the trailing arm, it sheared the bolt right off. You see the whole stud, there it is, that goes into the trailing arm over here is actually busted right off, and then what happened is this got forced into the air bladder on the shock. And I thought it was just, you know, the shock was shitty or something, or it was my fault that I overinflated it, or maybe they just wore out. But no, it turns out something else broke that's actually cut into the air shock. The air shocks will probably fine otherwise. But we're going to go ahead and remove this air shock. We're going to have to weld a new stud on here and get this straightened out again so that way that functions. And once that's done, then we have to mount up a brand new shock into position and get this all resituated and put back together. So we're going to cover that in this video. So subscribe, like this video, and thanks for watching. Well, in front of me here we have these shocks. This is the one that blew out. And from the looks of it, a piece of it came completely off here. It just blew out. There's a retainer ring, which is supposed to hold this all together. It gets pressed up inside of here. But apparently it did get hit by this, punctured it way up in here. The ring came flying off and the condom came unrolled. At that point it blew out this spoo, which is all over the bottom here, and it's really, really sticky. And it's probably the first time that you've ever seen me wear gloves. Normally I wouldn't, but in this case it's something that's sticky. I mean, just equally as sticky as something that I would make myself, but just as contrasting of a color, I guess you could say. So anyway, this needs to be replaced. You will notice right away that some of these parts on this shocks don't match, and this is normal. This one here, I cut it down. I cut off a little bit of the extra here on the end, and then I made an appropriate sized bushing to slide inside of here and got that set up. On the other end, it just needed to be drilled out a hair. You can use a reamer in it, you probably should. In my case, I just ran a drill bit through it that was the right size, and that solved that problem. And then it's ready to bolt on. There's really not much to these things at all. But the failure on this was pretty tremendous. I've never seen the rubber roll down this far. You know what they say, if you've ever seen the rubber roll down all the way. But this one, it gives you a good idea just how long this boot actually is, and how that's rolled up inside of there. It's actually turned inside out on itself, which that retaining ring is then pushed down in there and holds it all together. And it looks like it's crimped. There's some crimps around the edges of it. I've never taken one of these apart before. It's kind of interesting. I might go to dissecting this, however there might be some pressurized gas in there. I don't know if it's pressurized on the other end of it. I really don't know how these work on the inside. So maybe that's just a bad idea. Maybe I shouldn't take that apart. But anyways, we're going to replace it. We're going to show you a little bit about what it takes to cut this down to make this fit, and how I got that onto the Fastback. And it will also apply to early Beetles, because early Beetles use the same shock. One thing I almost forgot to cover is that this is the little shock stub. This is what held this shock on. This is the washer and nut attached to it. This is what broke off of the car. It looks like it has been welded, perhaps welded by the previous owner, and they did not get adequate penetration on this thing. That's the actual bolt sticking up out of there, so they barely got any penetration on that at all. This is why it broke. The second reason why it broke is because if you look at the hole in this, you'll see the diameter of it, and it's large, like the diameter on the bottom of the shock here. Now that stub is tapered. It has a much bigger end where it attaches to the trailing arm, but this little stub is smaller, much smaller diameter. It probably would have been nice if it was the same diameter the whole way down, but that's not the way they built this thing. But due to the length of the stub, not everybody has a long stub, this is actually, or I should say, this is actually forced to sit on the threaded part. So this had not been welded properly, and this is why this went ahead and ripped this little stub off of here. Just the force, the shear force on it, it ripped it right off of there. So anyway, I'm going to grind this down to an appropriate taper, put a nice little point on it there, put it back into place, weld it, put a nice bead all the way around it, put this back together the way it was before, and call it done. I don't see any reason why, if this was welded on properly, that this should break it off. But it would be nicer if it would fit where it's supposed to be, but like I said, due to that length of that stub, it's no way possible. So this is how it's gonna go down. Okay, there's our washers off of there. We got our tapered tip. That's what we're going to weld to. These two tips are going to come together like this. And you can see that groove that runs in between here all the way around. That's where the weld is going to fill in. That will give us the adequate penetration that we're looking for. This, I think I could snap another set of vice grips on here and unscrew it from this one. I don't remember that being a problem to get it on or off, so it's a little rusted, but it should break free. I don't think it'll be an issue. We got this little guy. Needs to go back on right here, and it's going to get welded in there like that. And yes, I can see a bunch of welding slag around here. This is a mess. So I'm going to hit that with the grinder also real quick and just flatten it out. So right now it's a mess. Shouldn't be like that. Oh yeah, it's flat now. That'll get it. It's just difficult to get the camera in there at the same time that I'm working, because it would have been easier if I would have attacked it this way, but I can't because the camera's here, so I'm going to have to come in from the other side. Sacrifices I make for my YouTube viewers. Thanks you guys for all your views. Thanks you guys for pressing like. Thanks you guys for subscribing. Alright, gotta pull my head out from underneath that fender. I can't deal with the smoke for that long. Alright, I welded it on crooked. And it broke off already. Yay. Let's try that again. Let that cool down just a moment, knock the vice grips off, and then I'll run my way all the way around it and then make sure that the nut still threads on and off properly. I never welded a nut to a bolt before in a situation such as this, but I imagine it would be quite frustrating to whomever it would happen to. Alright, I'm going to shut the camera off because I got to get to the underside where you're not going to be able to see me anyway. Alright, we're good in there. That sucker's all welded on. A little crooked, but I'm not going for perfection. It's not a rotating mass, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It's close enough. It's just to hold a nut on, and that's where it's at. So I'm satisfied with it. It looks like there's a little bite taken out of it, but that's actually just the end of the bolt. That wasn't anything that I did to it. Apparently somebody had replaced it in the past before. So anyways, that looks good to me. The nut still threads on the end like it's supposed to. Everything looks good. I'm going to hit it with a file a little bit around the edges to make sure that it still clears the shock bushing when I slide it on. Now don't do something stupid when you're cutting down these pieces, like put a nick into here or up into the top here. It does maintain pressure, so if you start cutting holes it could explode on you, or you could just ruin a good shock. So be gentle with it. Just cut the parts that need it. Now taking a file, you want to deburr the inside edge there because your bushing is going to push into that. And this bushing was actually made from an old shock. The old blown out shock, I knocked this right out of it. And it just happens to be the same size as this. So it should go right in there. Just a little bit of coaxing. Minor abuse of a tool. That's it. And it's in place. This is now ready to go over the lower shock mount. Alright, the top of the shock needs the hole enlarged. This bolt doesn't quite make it in there. So we're going to need to find a drill bit of the right size. Hate us metric sexuals out there. You're looking at about a 12 millimeter hole is what needs to be drilled out to widen to. And that should give us enough room in there to slide that bolt in and out and get this thing mounted. Okay, going to go into my drill box, get the right size one. We're going to put it up here on the press and we're going to drill through. I grabbed 3 different size drill bits for this task so we can incrementally step it up. Because if you don't have the appropriate reamer, drilling out a tight little hole is much like anal. You have to work your way up to it, and you got to use lots of lube. Alright, let's see if we can get the sucker put together before it gets dark here. We've got to attach the bottom of the shock first. Be nice if I could find the bolts here. Friggin' lost them somewhere. First we want to put the bottom shock mount on. Should go on just like this. This is the bushing that we added earlier, as well as the bolt tip. We welded on the stub down there. Okay, we've got that into place. The upper needs to go on as well. Now this one is going to be a little tricky. And the reason for that is because we need to raise this up. So what I'm going to do is put the jack underneath it here and get it lifted up to where it needs to be. Alright, there it is. Perhaps just a little more. Okay. Now this is one you got to be careful when you work with because this will bust your knuckles wide open. We need to mount the bottom bit over here for the sway bar mount. This guy, it's got to go back onto the opposite side of the shock. Just like this. Alright. Now before you put all these little bushings and stuff on, I advise you get that nut tight because you won't have another opportunity to do it. The bushings will block your access to that bolt. all of the rubber gogies back on. I don't remember what order they go in. Pretty sure it goes down from the top like this. This is on the top. It then goes through the angle. This goes on there. And like that, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I'm mistaken. It goes on like this. Then this. Then it goes through the sway bar. And another one goes up like this. And another one like this. Just like that. That's how it gets assembled. In between these gaps is the angle, upper bracket, and then the sway bar on the bottom. So we should be able to just drop this right into place here. Wonder what kind of problem I'm gonna have. There's always some kind of problem. Yeah, the holes don't want to line up. Okay. Shutting off the camera. Well, anyway, this was really hard to shoot because I was laying right in this area and I couldn't get the camera low enough to be shooting from either side, so I need to come up with a new solution for a lower tripod mount. But anyway, here's the sway bar, here's the sway bar mount, there's the shock, and here is the shock lower mount that goes through everything. So it's actually a stub that sticks out of the lower trailing arm. Here's all those little rubber bushings that go in here, as well as little metal spacers. This is what attaches it all together. Everything is currently attached again the way it needs to be. Want to make sure that we put our brake lines and our speedometer cables and everything back in the directions they belong. I had everything all bunched up where it didn't go. We need to hook up our air lines next. Of course, if you have two air shocks, you'd be doing the same thing on either side, sans repairing any of the damaged parts. This was just an exception this one time around. But now that that's done, you need to do the same thing on the other side, and then you need to route your air lines. On the passenger side of my car, and this is all Volkswagens from 68 and up, have the gas flapper on the passenger side. Right inside here I mounted my Schrader valve. So you can see that right there. And what is a Schrader valve? Well, it's the same kind of valve that you have on your tires, and this comes with most air shock kits. This allows you to fill your air in the shock. So I routed that on down, and it goes into a T. One line goes down to the passenger side, and the other line goes over to the driver's side. Right up here, you can see this little line. This is it, right here. And it's just long enough to get it into the shock, right where it belongs, right there. Now, you want to make sure that when you route it past all of your tie rods. Make sure it doesn't rub up against anything, because if it rubs on anything, it's going to wear a hole, and then it's going to leak air. And if it leaks air, well, then it's the opposite of what you're looking for it to do. I just need to get that sucker hooked up to there. We should be able to put our wheel back on, and I'll be able to demonstrate the air functioning on this car. Much, much better quality video with professional lighting apparatus installed, huh? Alright, we got to take our bits that go on the end here, push this one, the nut, down the line first, and you want to press your little rubber gogie on next. You want to make sure the end of your hose doesn't have any nicks or scratches. That's going to affect its sealing, and mine does. So I'm going to actually cut this. Just take a little bit off the end of it wherever there's scratches on it. The best way to take that little piece off is with a razor blade. Just let it slice right through. Okay. Yeah, that had a lot of scratches and dings in it, which would cause it to leak. Now these are a finicky thing here. When you go to tighten these things down, make sure they're as clean as you can get them. Push this in. Push it right into the shock just like that. And when you push the nut, it will actually push the gogie into position for you. And then just gently tighten this down. Do not crank this. If you over tighten this, you'll either strip the plastic nuts or you'll cause the hose to crimp itself. Now what I do at this point is I like to check and put air in the system. You should be able to max out at 100 psi without any leaks. Check it. Put 100 psi in the system and see what happens. Spray a little bit of soapy water on your connections and make sure you don't see any bubbles. If you do, you got a bad connection. Take it apart, reset the rubber gogi in it, or cut a little end off the hose, because it might just be scratched or kinked or bent, or make sure nothing is cut, twisted, or you get the idea. Make sure it's not screwed up. Alright, we're ready to put some air in it, and let's see if it holds. We've dropped some air into him, and you see how this shock is all bloated out. The bladder is now full of air. It's holding 100 psi currently, and everything looks like it's good to go. I didn't find any leaks to speak of. Everything looks like it's going to be good, so we're going to put that wheel back on the hub down below, and once we've got that set, we're going to drop it on the ground, and we're going to show a little bouncy action. And then we're going to go have a look at the 1956 oval of mine, and I'll show you how the suspension differs on the Fastback from what we have on the oval, or at least what's currently on the oval, which actually doesn't even belong on the oval. There's still a little blood on here from the other day. It's where I managed to nick that knuckle, and it didn't bleed a whole lot. Not as far as what's concerned, not as far as how much I usually bleed, because I'm a gusher. Got our wheel back on. And one hubcap. One dirty hubcap. Alright. There we have it. At maximum height with 100 psi. Alright. Might go down a little lower once it settles. The difference is subtle, but it's enough that it gets compliments. Let's go ahead and put 100 psi back into it. And now she's back up. Typically when I drive it, I've got about 60 to 80 psi in the air shocks. A little bit lesser, you'll get a softer feel, of course. Don't drive it with 100, because when you're hitting those bumps, what's going to happen is those air shocks are going to compress, and your psi is going to go up, and you're going to blow the damn things out. And one of the reasons why these didn't blow up because of anything that I've done is I'm not riding on them at their extreme limits. I'm only using the air shocks to complement the ride and to raise it up just a hair. What they were really designed for was to help you support additional weight. So what I've done is I've actually stiffened up the front suspension a bit and made it feel a little bit more like the Z does. Much stiffer with the sway bars and everything. This thing handles a whole lot better. Right now I'm overdriving the tires that are on here. These tires are stock specifications. The sidewalls are way too soft and wobbly. And the whole car just shakes back and forth on those tires, and I don't really care for that much. So down the road I'll probably upgrade that, but I definitely won't be putting these types of tires on the oval. Now under the oval here, you can see we have a different kind of air shock because this car has a different kind of axle beam. This is a ball joint style axle beam, and the top of the shock towers come off at a 90-degree angle this way, so you have to have a shock that the bolt sticks directly out the top of, and that's what the little stub is sticking out up here. So rather than them coming in perpendicular like this, they actually go straight up. Only in the top. In the bottom, the mount is the same. So these were a direct bolt-on to this suspension here without any modification. The air line goes down under the chassis, and the only reason why I installed these was to get the car to the car show back in October. Just wanted to be able to get the car up so I can get the tow bar under it, and then when I got to the show, let the air back out and dump the suspension back down to the bottom. Looking under here, you can see we got a little bit of rubbing. This car would go a lot lower except for the fact that it does rub on the headlight buckets, but I never ever intended the car to be that low anyway. Yeah, the air line, as you see, it goes back under the car that way, and the one from the other side comes back this way. And I'll get up under the hood and I'll show you exactly where they run to. Well, I'm improvising a little video here because unfortunately one of my clips got lost during the transition of the videos from my camera to my computer. So here's the T-fitting that we were talking about. This is it right here. I have it coming through the bumper hole. You can see how these pieces all come together as a T in there. Each one of these has a little rubber gogie in it. A little short length goes to here, to the Schrader valve. And the same exact apparatus is on the Type 3 behind the gas flap door. So I just have it sticking out of here so it's really easy to get to. I can let the air in and out at will, and I don't have to open up the hood. And the hood on the oval likes to get stuck. So I've been dealing with that, but once I get a rubber seal on there, that won't be a problem because it actually gets caught. The metal lips like to just bind on each other. But again, I don't have to deal with that if I just stick it through the bumper hole. Up under the front beam here, you can see the adjusters in the beam, and it's important that you have an adjustable beam so that you can actually raise and lower the car. And the key is on this one is to get this bolt out of the way and then loosen the one up here on the top so that it travels freely. Now there's another one up here that you just can't see. It's just out of the camera's view, and I can't really get the camera. Yeah, there it is. You can see it. There's two of them for both the upper and lower. They both operate together, so whatever you do on one you should do on the other. In this case, it's nice to have an adjustable beam because let's say you blew out an air shock for some reason, what you can do is you could jack the car back up and then tighten your adjusters back on, and you can drive home. So that makes a practical installation for this car. But in having these loose, it allows travel to be free, so that way the air shocks can control this car and raise or lower it just by adding some air or releasing some air. The operation is real simple, and because the Beetle is so light, these air shocks are actually, if I'm not mistaken, for a Corvette. But because the front end is so light on this thing, it actually allows you to operate the entire front end suspension without having to rely on the torsion leaves that are inside this tube. So they do travel freely on here. It does work well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bolt everything back together, and I'm going to demonstrate it going up and down from underneath. And there is my wheel adapter, which is converting the 4x130 Volkswagen pattern to a 5x130 Porsche pattern. Yes, I do know there's supposed to be a special extra long bolt that goes into there, but this is only temporarily being used so I can roll the car around. But anyway, that adapter needs to go away. That's a 1-inch spacer, but that's a subject for another video, which we're currently trying to figure out as to how to get the Porsche 944 brakes up on the front end here. These are a set of drop spindles also. You don't have to have drop spindles to install air shocks. Boy, I cannot turn this thing. Yeah, you don't have to have the drop spindles that you see on here to have air shocks, but it does make the front end lower if you do. So the combination is drop spindles, adjustable beam, set of air shocks, and that gets you going for raising and lowering either a bolt joint or a link pin Beetle. The only difference is on a link pin you'd be using the same shocks that you saw on the Fastback. Now that I've explained how it works, let's go ahead and show you a demonstration. As always, if you liked this video, give me a thumbs up. If you hate the video, thumb it down. And if you really enjoy it, go ahead and subscribe to me. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it.